Hi, everyone. I am Patrick. I am talking about Fusion, and that's very exciting because I think there are a lot of things to get excited about when it comes to DaVinci Resolve, like the raw accessibility of Resolve being free. That's pretty wild. I don't think there's anything more exciting when it comes to untapped potential than the Fusion page. I can understand it can be a little scary sometimes, a little intimidating, but I think it's absolutely worth it if you dive in. My channel is mostly about the Fusion page, and really I focus in on presets and templates that you can then use on the edit page if you are too scared of the Fusion page. So this is just like a few things. I have some like effects and titles, all different stuff, drag and drop onto the edit page. Because although it's not a thing I'm really talking about this session, almost anything you do inside the Fusion page, you can package it up, make it a drag and drop preset on the edit page. It's incredible. It's very, very cool. I'm going to jump ahead and we're going to see what we're going to talk about this session, and then I might give a little disclaimer. But we're going to look at some of this. Lots going on, lots of really cool stuff I am excited about. And that could take a very long time to talk about. Disclaimer is, I think for a lot of people, you might not have the best time if you actively try to follow along in real time. Some of you totally can. That's great, especially if you find something and you want to like pull it up, explore it. That's cool. But we also have a project file. If you have a blank Fusion composition on your timeline, you got this little guy, and if you just drag that into Fusion, pipe it into a media out, boom, you have this effect. It does look a little different. I have disabled some of the 3D stuff and some of the extra effects going on, but if you open this up, first, yes, that's a lot of nodes. But down here are all these grayed out nodes. If you want to go back, if you come to any of these nodes and toggle them all back on, and then come to this dissolve and say, hey, I want it to be the old way, bring it back to background, you will get exactly what I demoed with the full 3D screen, that movement as well. That's sort of like the polish on top. We are very interested in the things going on in each of these panes, and that's what I'm going to talk about. And really, I'm going to talk about systems, because it's not too awful when you dive into Fusion for the first time. You have an asset, you have a graphic, like you make a background and mask it, then you pipe it into a transform node, and hey, you can make keyframes, you can move it around. That's great. A lot of the power of Fusion comes from the systems inside and how they can build upon each other. And that's what we are doing through a lot of this. We have lots of random motion, we have looping motion, we have lots of systems talking to each other. So that's what we are going to talk about. Now, what I am going to do, I am going to go to a blank Fusion composition, but I am keeping this full version here as well. Even if you are trying to build this, this can be useful to have a fully built out version. If some of you just want to poke around the full version as we walk through, you might be able to learn a lot through that as well. But also, this is also here for me because I will almost certainly actively need to reference some things I had already done previously, and I'm trying to remember lots of different things. But we're also going to use this as a jumping off point. At the very beginning of our node tree, I have a background node. I will preview that on our first viewer here. I am also very thankful Casey went earlier and covered a lot of bare bones Fusion basics, because I'm not going to do that. So if I can just demonstrate that there is a lot of cool stuff in Fusion and it's worth investing a lot more time, that's great. So I have a background node, and then I have all these rectangle masks that are each of these shapes. And I am merging those together for a little bit of reason, but also a side note. A lot of people know that mask data gets you this black image, white image. The white is where it will apply the mask. But you can actually just combine masked data with a merge node, which is cool and kind of niche, but very, very cool. So we have all these masks lined up on top of each other. They're into a background node, and then I use a brightness and contrast node to make them all very dim. So what I am going to do, since I've done this, is copy all of those and straight use that as a starting point here. So we have these, we have that. And the first thing I want to do is actually create that little green border we had behind each of these nodes. I know they are very dim. I'll pull this up a little bit. Yeah. I just want a little green border around all of those. And there are a few different ways we could do that, but we're going to start by using the system of instance nodes right away. Instance nodes, very cool. I like to think of them as selective copies. So I'm copying all my masks here, Control-C, and then I'm typing Control-Shift-V. And so we have copies of those nodes with this little green line connecting them. And if we click on any of the instance nodes, all of the parameters in the inspector have a little green line over them. So here I can see this first one is this shape, and the original node is the exact same shape. But I can go to the instance, and if I right-click on border width, I can go to D-instance, and I'm going to do the same thing on solid. And if I uncheck solid, oh, make sure I am previewing the right one, pull up border width, then, hey, now that's just an outline, but the original mask stays exactly the same. So I'll pull those two up separately. But the instance of, or the power of instance nodes is that if I change any of the other parameters, those are linked. So if I want to change the width of this shape, I am changing the width of the outline and the width of the background node. So very quick, I'm going to do that same process of the instance, walk through. So there are, of course, a wild amount of uses for instance nodes, but especially mostly for like keeping things dynamic if you aren't sure if things are exactly the way you want them to. Instead of like copying a node and just pasting it in 12 different places, and then if you need to update like one position or width, that can be not fun if you need to do the exact same thing in all those different nodes. But once I am through those, I will make sure they are all border widthified the same amount. And these I will actually not use merge nodes, but I will just connect the raw mask inputs together, which is how masks function more than not. You can pipe them right into each other, which is a little different from our making toast illustration. But now, oh, and I tried to connect it to this brightness and contrast, but first I do need another background node. We will make a cool techie teal color. Pipe that, yeah, that in, wait, nice. That in, connect the two outputs to get a merge, and now, ooh, I didn't click some buttons. Uncheck that, uncheck that. We have all those same boxes with nice little outlines, and if I go back to any of those masks, change the other parameters, we're good to go. And now, we're gonna look at our first little window. We're going to talk about this window up here, which just has this little like wiry pattern swinging through. And we're going to touch on a really cool tip about snapping. Because especially if you're dealing with anything with like hard like right angle lines, or you want things to come back to a perfectly level point, if I made a just polygon node here and pulled up the border width and started like clicking around to make, ooh, not that width, to click around, you can hold shift, which will like keep that at only right angles or 45 degrees. That can be cool, but we can also do something else that's pretty nifty. I have a plain white background, and if this is on viewer 1, and if I scale out, you can see the main resolution we're working with here. On like background nodes and text and some other stuff, you have this main image control, which will default to your timeline resolution. But you can uncheck that, and I can bring this all the way down to 16 pixels by 9 pixels. And just to save a step, I'm actually going to like double that up to what? 32 by 18. And then, hey, once more, 64 to 36, right? Cool. And now, if I preview that on the same window, I can zoom all the way in. And because that's correct, right? 64 by 32, cool. This is a 16 by 9 image. And one of the powerful systems in Resolve is that you can toggle on this like actual like pixel grid control, but the default coordinate system in Fusion is going to be 0, 0 in the bottom left-hand corner and 1, 1 in the upper right-hand corner. And because you can preview things in 2 viewers and interact with things on one viewer that exist in a second viewer, we're going to see some pretty cool stuff pretty soon. I'm going to make just another white, or yeah, kind of tealy solid. I will connect an ellipse mask on that. So we have this nothing right here, but this is where the viewer, I am viewing this actual layer here. But if I zoom in on this panel, I can right click and get some very interesting options. The first one being options show pixel grid. We got down to 64 by 32, and now each of these squares is 1 pixel. Very cool. And then we right click and come to controls, snap to pixel. And now if we select our polygon, which remember exists over here, but we can also click on this first viewer to add points. So what I am doing, I'm going to very quickly, oh, we have this point already. That's cool. I'm going to very quickly click around, drag this down, and we'll see what we're doing. Like click, 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 click. Great, that looks awesome. But if I zoom in, after I deselect that, if I zoom in, yes. Now if I click on any of these points, they will perfectly snap to that grid. So you can make like perfectly geometric shapes. Ooh, this is interesting that it's added some easing. I can come up to linear, eliminate that. So if you want things to be perfectly straight, snap into perfect lines, you can toggle on a pixel grid. This is really great, especially if you want like very specific angles. You can do the straight, okay, this is like this many pixels over this many pixels. And you see I am giving these points that sort of exist, here we are, on this very small pixel grid, but because of that relative viewer, we also have this line over here on our like full resolution window. You can bring that down. It looks like we might have some funky easing stuff still going on here. We do. Click that out. You can always change this if you want like sharp edges. Bring that all the way down. And that's really cool. And then what we are going to do is animate this line to wipe across our screen. And the main control that if you know a little bit you might think you go with is this length, because yeah, you can write that off and ride it all the way on. Little pro tip as well, if you go down to 0, you will have this little nub where it just starts, and that is because of this like rounded little like, I don't know, in After Effects it's the butt cap, I don't know what it's supposed to be here. Rounded, but if you square that out, it goes away and only starts when it rounds up. So you could have this right on, but length by default will not let you write that off, so we are going to use position. I'm just gonna start at frame 0, make sure we're good, set a keyframe on position, and change this to -1. It's completely gone. Come forward a little bit, set that to 1. It doesn't look like anything happened, but between those keyframes, this wrote on and then wrote off. And if I pull down length, then that will even be a little thinner, depending on how much you want as this roams across your screen. But that'll just be its little deal. And then in our illustration, we wanted a few copies of these. There are numerous ways to like create copies, but we're going to leverage the main power of the Fusion system just by creating a transform node. And hey, creating 4 transform nodes, and we can take this one output into all of those different transform nodes that will act upon that in different ways. If you connect the outputs of these, they will get merged all on top of each other. So if I go to one, like scale it up, change position, do some fun stuff. I change these however I want. If I want one massive version, I'll then have to scale it down a whole lot. Great. Ooh, there we go. Maybe we want one just small. Very cool. And this one will just shift. We are moving, which means this won't look good. But if we preview all of those, we have, oh, that looks very not good. A few different layers on top of each other, and if I come into any of these any of these merge nodes, I then also have control over the blend setting, which will be like a per element like opacity slider too. Ooh, I didn't set this up correctly, but that's okay. Some of you see what's happening, but that's great. So this looks okay, and I am going to, one, make a transform node after that and pipe that into my main little panel window we have here. And I want this just in this upper right-hand corner. So on one hand, I can scale this down, shift it up into the corner, but then we have a lot of that extra spillover. But remember, we have these individual mask windows. You will have to zoom out a whole bunch if you go back to full res. And this is the window we want this to exist in. So this is building that main background shape and also that outline shape, but I can take the output of that and mask this merge node way over here, and it will be perfectly trimmed inside that window. And again, this will remain dynamic. If I change the height of that, it will only reveal what's inside. It's using the exact same information. And that's pretty cool. So let's keep going. We're going to look at something building on the systems inside this mask, looking at the same length position here. This is very interesting because, hey, this is just I'll draw this here, and I'm going to align, hold shift to be a straight line right up. If I pull up border width, we have this little line, which, hey, looks kind of like these little lines. And we have this length parameter. I will also, hey, grab this background that we used for those outlines, copy that. I'm going to use instance nodes here, because if I connect this, and at any point I want to change my overall color scheme, if all of the background nodes driving your color scheme are instance nodes, you change one, you change them all. So that will be this line. And we have this real nifty length slider that goes from 0 to 1. And this is great because this is effectively a percentage slider. Just instead of 0% to 100%, it's 0 to 1, which is very easy to make 0 to 100. So we are going to use this as this sort of like, not progress bar, but I don't know, fill up bar, whatever word I cannot remember, because I haven't taken a breath in a while. Cool. So what I'm going to do here is a right click and go to modify with, we have all these pretty wild things. We're going to perturb. Perturb is very fun. You also have shake. I like perturb better. But if I come into modifiers, which is up now, if I play through this, and I will actually get rid of that as well. If I play through this, now that length, you see here it's shaking, and at points it does go above 1, which won't be visible here. So I want to set this value, which is its starting perturb position, to 0.5, halfway up, and the strength will also be 0.5. So this is going to wiggle from 0.5 and then 0.5 above, 0.5 below, which is, hey, all the area we want it to go. And then that will just go like, whoa, up and down, and whoa. And strength we're not going to touch, because that would push it past it above or below. But wobble, we can pull up a good bit, and speed as well. And that will just do some wobbly stuff. That looks great. And then we can get into some more stuff with expressions. Expressions are entirely their own world, but they can be very fun. So to demonstrate / use in another second, I'm going to create a text plus node. And hey, we'll go ahead and connect these. And I will type something in here. Nope. I'm going to right click and go to expression. And here, I'm going to go back to that polygon and click this little pin to pin this, so that when we also click text, we have text, and then down here we have that main polygon. And I can go to that text where I've added an expression, click this little pick whip, scroll down, and go right to that length data. And then now, as that wiggles, it will pull that value in. Very cool. And if we want this to instead be from 0 to 1, 0 to 100, all we have to do is times by 100, and it'll be 45 point whatever percent. And I'm going to, nope, I'm not going to. I was going to try to do it without referencing it, but that is hubris. I am coming back up to this pretty messy doc earlier that is looking at the same thing, and I'm going to pull in this expression, just math.ceil, ceiling, and then that right length times 100. We already have this part. Sorry, let me zoom in. We already have this part, right? We're already linked to that in our expression. And if we math times ceiling, and then put that next expression inside it, all that will do is round to the nearest number. That's great. And then, hey, 2 periods just means and also add. And then we are doing in parentheses a percentage thing. What's that called? That. The sign. Nice. Yes, that. So we have other stuff in there. So I will just copy that math ceiling. I don't know whether I was more concerned I would misspell math or ceiling, but that times that, period, period. In quotation marks, we got percentage sign. And then boom, now we got a dynamically updating a percentage sign as this wiggles back and forth. Now, a few times in here, I am using Perturb to just drive animation, but that is also just because I just needed something and I didn't care what it was. You could manually keyframe this length slider, and the rest of it would work just fine. If you wanted to talk about it going up to a very specific point, just keyframe it to that point, and the number will update. One thing I didn't note that will be important now is that in this Perturb modifier, we have this little random seed, which is what is driving the specific random motion here. And that's cool, because if we talk about, in my original, I had a few different copies of these. And even, yeah, I will come down here and like slide that, make it look a little bit better. If I copy this entire thing, I'm not pasting an instance node, I'm just pasting a straight copy. And if I merge that together, those will be over themselves, so you can always keep it up. This is its own complete separate thing, but since I just copied the entire thing, pasted it, these will move in the exact same random order, but that is driven by that random seed. If I go into this copy of the Perturb modifier, all I need to do is click reseed. That will be its different number, and you'll have 2 random things. And I did that a few more times, and it looks like this really great, like futuristic UI. It's measuring something, and it looks cool. And then all I did next to that, which I will demonstrate almost as quickly, by copying another instance of that color. And you could like selectively like instance these text nodes together. And so like if you change just like a font on one, it changes all of them on that. You can connect a lot of stuff in this way. And it's pretty exciting. But you can also just do this ellipse mask, which I will do with here. Mask over, which will look bad, but uncheck solid, pull up that. This length functions kind of similarly, where if you have like an open mask, it will go from like where it starts to where it ends. But if it completes itself like a circle, it will have a set start point, and you can set on, and then this position will sort of rotate the entire mask around itself. So we can add an expression on this length, parent it right to that other length, and then as this main bar wiggles, this circle will wiggle the same amount, but in like a visually pretty different and distinct way. And as dynamic as you make a mask, you could like do a just straight squiggly line, and it would still go around that. The only other extra bit I added on polish of this is right-clicking on position, and I went to expression here. So this one point of this circle is going to be staying in the same spot, and then it's wiggling the other point around. If I want both of them to move, I can pull in time, which will look at the main frame count of the entire comp, and that'll be a little slow when talking about something like this. So I can times that by just like 4, and now that circle will be slowly 100, Huh. Oh. Maybe. As that position rotates around, this should also, maybe it's too small. So I'm driving this by time in a way that I did at one point, which I can reference here if I actually want to look at it. Time, oh, maybe, or, oh, angle, not position. Don't do position, do angle, because apparently that doesn't do what I want it to. But angle does. So now as this rotates around, the circle is rotating and it's also getting like randomly extended as well. We're getting a little choppy here. I might grab some. We'll see what we can do there. Cool. That's a lot already, right? That's a lot. Let's see what we can leverage by jumping to the shapes system, another system. Shapes relatively recent. That was like, what, 17 shapes came in maybe? I didn't touch it for a long time, but it's very cool because we are going to jump to this guy over here. This is a little more visually obvious, some of it, if you know what's going on, because here we also used our little cloud box fast noise. I'll pull it up on viewer 1. Hey, we have smoke, and if I want to get rid of that, we want the smoke to be more detailed and smaller and more contrasty. Yeah. And maybe we want to uncheck this lock and pull up the Y scale so that when I zoom out, maybe, pull down the Y scale so it stretches in a really cool way. And we're going to save that because, spoiler alert, we're going to use this as mask data. What? But first, I'm going to create an S rectangle tool and then immediately an S render tool. Because the shape system is a system, I cannot go to this S rectangle node and just preview it on a second viewer. This is like really dynamic, really flexible, and preserves a lot of data inside the system. So in other places in Fusion, like if you push something off of like the side of your view area and you add a later transform node, you can't pull that back in because like that first node pushed it away and it's gone. With like sometimes that doesn't happen when you use it in a certain way. But inside the shape system, it's real dynamic. We have this S render, and a lot of times when you have your first structure in here, just like jiggle something on here, and boom, we've got a square. I can bring this square, I want it to be very small, 0.2, 0.2 on the width over here. I am making myself try to remember to zoom in for people. We have a square, and then out of the square, we can add an S. All the nodes inside the shape system start with S. That helps. S, duplicate, and we're create what? Like 5 copies, maybe. Change their X offset. So hey, some stuff is going on. I'm going to duplicate and paste that, except instead of an X offset, we want a Y down offset. And then if we bring back in that S transform node, we can control this entire block of once. And I just want these in frame, and then I'll scale down this whole system. We effectively want just like a wall of big blocky blocks. And then we're going to do something real cool. So one reason I was really excited to give that main project file is that you can learn a whole lot by like breaking down big effects like that. And I'm going to show off something I first learned from one of the included free templates like that everyone has loaded on their system right now inside Fusion. And that is after this S render, I'm going to create a plane transform node. I'm changing these edges to wrap, and if I make sure that is previewed, when I scale this down, it wraps those edges, and we went a few big old blocks to very quickly a giant field of pixels. So I can, I'm just going to you know what, I will create another transform after that, just for fun. I'm going to pipe that back into my main timeline. So we have these pixels over everything. Wow, this looks interesting, and not what I want to do. I'm going to add a transform node after these like data things we did. Sorry, we're getting this up. Because, hey, we want to do the same thing we did earlier. I'm going to shrink this down. This won't like naturally move out of the box, but hey, this is just where I want to position it. And then if we bring back in this pixel field, it will be over the entire image. I definitely do not want that. But we could, in that transform, maybe scale that back down, get it in that corner, and then just like we did before, there we are, zoom in. I need to find that box in our master rectangle here, so I can just click around that one. And you know what? Instead of dragging that line all the way around, I am just going to paste a clean instance node over here. I'm not going to de-instance anything, just instead of line stretching the entire way across our comp, even though this green line will still be there. I can just pull that in as the mask, boom, comped, and then this little magical fast noise guy, I'm going to actually slot this in. I wonder if this will let me. But I'm going to grab the output of this, actually mask the fast noise first, and then use the fast noise as a mask, bringing that pixel field in. And now we have this pixel field that if we go back to the fast noise, pull up the seethe rate, then as we scan through that, it'll just sort of be all funky. And even better, if we wanted to, there are a few ways we could colorize this, but back in the S rectangle, because of how this is built up, is actually that same core color data. I could always expression these specific things, or I could get close enough. Very cool. Shapes, back to fast noise. We're going to stick with shapes for a little bit because they're very cool. And we're going to touch on this very interesting thing happening here. It's like wibbly, it's wobbly, it's like dynamic, but it's what is going on. It's shapes. So I'm going to make an S ellipse tool and an S render tool. Check that out. And yes, I will uncheck solid. I will pull up border width, and I'm pulling length all the way down to 0, which gives us that little nub, which this time we actually want, because now it's a nub or just like a little circle. And if we pull up border width, that little circle will get larger. And I am, just like I created S duplicate to make that field, this time I'm going to bring in S duplicate, pull the copies up to what, like 10. And if I change this rotation, because this is origin relative, and like the origin of this S ellipse is still in the center, but the dot is off center. So when I pull up this rotation, it spins them around a whole lot if you grab it too fast. So I have 10. Let's do something manageable like 5. And so these spin around, but we can go back to our good friend expressions. This rotation, I want this rotation to perfectly space however many copies we tell it to. This doesn't like show off in the animation, but it's pretty cool. So I will take, I'm going to, type in 360, because degrees and math, and I'm just going to do that, divided by grab the pick whip, copies. And now if I change this copies to go back to 10, there will be 10 perfectly spaced, or I already did 5, 7 perfectly spaced, however many we want. And I can always go back to ellipse, bring down this border width even more if I really want to pack those. That's cool. I think that's cool. And because they are based off this ellipse, I think, yeah, I can pull this angle to rotate them around. And if you'll remember in our example, that outer ring sort of drove a lot of animation. So you can go to our good friend, Perturb. I will leave that as is. Check out this render, and maybe, is this perturbing? It is. It's perturbing a little slow. As this. Oh, it's because our strength is 1. We want something beefy like 360. So now this will go all over the place. On this example, I might need to even like pull down my wobble a little bit as this swings around, and this maybe speed. So this, I want this to not be so wild, not be so hectic, but more just like, oh, I feel like going this way, and then I feel like going this way. Very, very cool. And now, that is our main effect. And we are out of the shapes system here as well, but I want a trails node, which by default, if we preview that, this is sort of just like keeping a trail of whatever movement happens in your scene. So when we start playing, it will kick in, and we see it like, oh, it like keeps the trail of where it used to be, so very soon it becomes a circle. But, we can pull down scale, and instead of around, it like zooms in and creates this really cool thing. And then you pull down gain, and by some combination of pulling down gain, pulling down scale, you can get this little line of these going inwards, depending on how much you want to be visible. Yeah. And these trails have a time offset built in naturally, so when the outside system rotates around, the inside ones rotate a little later, depending on how fast they are rotating. Does pre-roll change that? A little? Fun. So then we've got cool stuff. The only other things I added in my original effect were a neat little glow, which glows around each of them. And to be cool, I unchecked my X glow from my Y glow and pulled in X, pulled up Y, so it has sort of this like up and down, right? That's pretty cool. And then, yeah, no, you click some buttons, it colorizes it. And now as this rotates around, it's like, it's clean, it's technical, but there's a little bit of organicness in the movement, both from the copies in the trails and the wobble in itself. Very cool. And then, hey, hit it with a transform to shrink the entire thing down, connect it all back up, and then boom, that's in its way. If I wanted to and wasn't moving on to like the coolest thing I have to show you, then I would go back and grab the mask. But you know how that looks in a box. Let's talk about something pretty wild. Like we haven't touched on wild stuff so far. Cool. We're talking about this little box here. I will drive into my finished product, and I should just be able to grab, okay. Yeah, with how this is merging together, I can't super grab just this box, but you see what's happening, right? We have this outside box, and then inside the box, we have this little box with lines connecting the little box to the big box. The outside box stays pinned to those lines, but as the little inside box move around, the lines are dynamically stretching to wherever that wobbles. Okay. The box is wobbling because of Perturb modifier. That's nothing special. What is special is what we're about to do. And it's cool. It's cool. I saw this in a few different ways, and like different people have expounded on it. There's a great video by a small channel, Dabbler Gaming. He does this specifically. He uses the same system to make like speech bubbles, where like the little like pointer stays perfectly pinned to the corner. That's great, but it uses the same system. And let me demonstrate this system. First, I'm gonna let's just like straight up create this in a vacuum. So let's say this is our big box. Oh yeah, we're gonna make this ugly. This is our big box. This is our little box. Zoop, zoop. Merge those together. Sorry if I am very small. Boom. Little box inside a big box. And then all I'm going to do is make a green background with one polygon. I'm going to loosely go from this big box corner to this little box corner, merge those all together. I will have to pull up the border width just a hair, preview that. Okay. This is like the effect for kindergartners, but it's going to work because we are all kindergartners in Fusion. Okay. And then just to get started on this rectangle 3, I am grabbing center. And this is interesting. We've only used perturb so far on like single value things, right? Scale, it's all 1, it's whatever. If you add perturb on the center parameter, it takes both the x and y into account, and the modifier itself actually changes. Now we have x scale over here and y scale. I want both of these to be something pretty small, 0.1. Ooh, the mouse is very zoomy. So now that just like wiggles loosely within the confines of the big box. Whew. Check this out. OK, I have big box here. And remember, we have this main like real pixel value resolution here. But if I were to like pull any points from this shape naturally, it would be on that 0 to 1 scale. But if I come up to these 3 dots up here and go to region, show DoD, DoD stands for something very impressive, I'm sure. But that gives me this little outline box. And this outline box gives us values here in each corner. Now this is very clean because this is a rectangle. If this was a circle, it would still draw a rectangle box around it. It's just marking the furthest most right pixel value, and then the furthest most down, and then the furthest most, oh, it was left before, and now it's right. So these are x, y coordinates, right? And because we're using a rectangle, they're very clean. This is the actual x, y coordinate of this point. This is the actual x, y coordinate of this point. If I wanted this point, I would grab this x and this y. But these are notably not in the 0 to 1 system. These are the actual pixel values. But this is information, and this is information we can pull in with expressions. Whew. So the last thing we need to do to sort of set this up is go to this polygon node we have here. I am clicking off of my pen tool and to this like selection tool. I'm selecting those 2 points, coming over here, check down publish points. When I click that, over here in my inspector, now I have point values for those 2 points. And if I wanted, I don't want to this time, I could right click on both of those and modify with perturb, and our line would just be random all over itself, but like dynamically stretching between those 2 points, because that's what a line does. On this instance, I want expression. And I am pulling up text because we're going to type some stuff out. OK. Check this out. I am pulling in reference because I'm scared again. This is pretty wild. I will explain this better, but this is what we're typing out. Cool. This is a big ol', no, I'm going to explain before I show because this is intimidating. In an expression, because we are controlling 2 different values in a point, you might see here it says point, and then this first number, the second number. So if I were to type in here, point, parentheses, 1, 1, close parentheses, it would set both of those to 1. Cool? So if I were to leave this second one correct, in this expression window, I am going to big box, which is background 4, and I'm not changing that right now. I could go into background 4, make sure I don't spell anything wrong. I'm typing period. Also, something I would have loved to have pointed out earlier, when you like manually pick whip, pick whipping is helpful, but you can always type it in straight. And then sort of the system for pointing to a specific node is typing the name of the node, period, like the parameter name. So at any time you could type in like transform 1, period, angle, and then that would pull in that value from that one. So I'm typing background node pointing to that specific node. And then to get that like DoD value, I'm typing in period, output, period, data window, and then brackets, 1, brackets. And if I zoom out and click away and preview that again, this goes out in the middle of nowhere. Because, not spoiler alert at all, I'm pulling in that same expression I just wrote, pulling back up a new version of text, scale up, and if I, text is a really fun way to preview expressions because it will just give you the output. So if I type expression and I type in that same background output data window 1, that gives me that 902 number. And I can use that number however I want to. But remember, the big thing we need to do is convert that back into our 0 to 1 system. But to get this 902, hey, we have our actual full x value. We know if it is completely to the right side of the screen, the x value is 1920. So this 902 will go from 0 to 1920. We want it to go from 0 to 1. So all we have to do is come back to this text. We have this number that gives us 902. I'm dividing that by the same background dot width, which, hey, is 1920. And then that gives us something because I spelled something wrong. What?
Background 4.
Oh, yep, thank you. Background 4. That gives us this number, which, I mean, spoiler alert, I'm not going to rig up something to demonstrate it. Hey, you notice how this point is almost halfway across our screen? It is 46.9% across our screen, because that in the system from 0 to 1 is 0.496. So I take all of that, come back to our ugly kindergartner effect, and I can type in here from scratch, point, parentheses, I am pasting all of what I just did, comma, 1, just as a placeholder, close parentheses, and now, did I break it? Oh, no, I didn't break it. It didn't stick to the line, but you know what it did? It went to the exact x coordinate of that line, because we're dealing with point data. So the x, if I go back to this big rectangle mask and increase the width, that line goes to the exact x position of the width, and all I need to do is pin the y position. So I can go back into this polygon, scale in. I'm grabbing everything from background 4 through the end of that data window. I am copying, and also I don't think I said it explicitly. This data window in brackets 1 is these series of numbers. If I want this number, brackets 1, brackets 2, brackets 3, brackets 4. And that can solve all of our problems. So I am copying, getting rid of that 1, pasting in for now a straight copy of that, except I want this, remember, in that, from where I set it up, the right top point. So the top y point would be brackets 4. So I will change this to brackets 4, and then the background 4. And then I'm opening Notepad and pasting this because I am concerned. What did I do? Oh, yes, I am still correct. But previously, where we divided that by width to get the x value, this time we need to divide by height. Oh, divide by that specific height. Really, any default node that is in your timeline resolution, you could pull in for this specific height or width value. You just need that 19 by 20. If that's your resolution, it's all over your timeline. Background, oh man, typing is. Background 4 dot height. Now, I copy all of that, paste it back, see if I broke it. I did. Open up a clean copy of Notepad. I'm guessing it's capital H, unless I did something else wrong. Expressions, this is my life now. Hey! So, if I go back to this big circle, if I change the height or the width, that moves around. But that is not really the tricky thing, because the inner circle is the one moving around. But now, we're in a pretty good spot because we can copy this entire thing. And if we add an expression on this second point, we can paste that in there. And because this, the bracketed 1 and 4 points are just saying top left, then we still want that top left data, just not for that specific node. Instead of background 4, we want background 5. So all I need to do, again, this height and width, this is an example. I'm not going to touch the divided by height and width, but I'm going to go to this background 4 and 5 data window, change that 4 to a 5. If I actually labeled things, you could change more things, change the 4 to a 5. If I zoom out,
you missed one. There's another background 4 there, I think.
Oh, that was for dividing by the width. I hope so. We'll find out. And then now, if I play, we shall see a little green square wiggling around, perfectly dynamically tied to big square. And then you just like do it a few more times. Or, yeah, so from here you are dealing with X and Y data, right? So on the big square, if I wanted this corner, I would grab, this exact point, which would be like data window 3 and 4 for width and height. That's its own thing. But the important thing is that you can pull in these specific pixel values, divide them by your main timeline, and get a perfect, like relative but precise position data inside the system. There are so many different ways you could do this. If you wanted something perfectly stuck to the like middle bottom of your shape, if I wanted like a little accent line or something coming out of this system, then I could take this X position, this position 1, furthest left, furthest right. Hey, add them together, divided by 2, you have the perfect center. Divide by width, and then tie the height data to this lower height. And wherever I would move this square, you'd have a little something stuck right there. Very, very flexible. And if you stick it all together, it looks bad. But if you spend more than an hour on it, you can get it looking pretty good. And then, you just like toss it in 3D. Ooh, that like the pixel grid thing I showed off? I pretty much did that again, except went a lot finer. That does not do that on the Fusion page. So I created pretty much a pixel grid over the entire effect, so it looks like a screen. And then I threw that on a 3D plane, and then I threw a duplicate of that onto a 3D plane, shifted it like a few pixels back, so you get this like really cool sort of mirrory stuff. That, like I said, is all this grayed out stuff if you want more information on that. But that would probably be its own talk. So systems are pretty cool. Fusion's pretty cool. And I talked about a lot. But I feel pretty good. Hopefully that's exciting. The only thing I skipped over was this little guy down here. If we played through that, this is using the exact same principle as these over here. I am driving a random value both in scale and opacity for these circles, and then that same value is driving its X position. So as it gets larger, it also gets more visible, goes further to the right. All of those are masked into their specific windows. If at any time I go back to a main mask, I can like pull in this width or whatever, and it will all stay dynamic. I can't straight drag this, because right now it would drag it drags the mask, but not what's inside the mask. You could always set that up that way. But I feel pretty good about that. It's intense, but it's fun. Thank you.